Dakar. Promoting dialogue.
It's midday in Dakar and 11 o'clock in Praia. Good afternoon and many thanks for staying tuned to West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM and online on wadr.org. Welcome to Newslink. Here are the top stories. Leader of opposition in Guinea-Bissau declares Umaru Sissoco Embalo no longer the country's president. CSOs in Liberia back government's drive to fight corruption as President Boakai issues an executive order.
We from civil society are particularly a bit happy that we see a more exerted effort on the part of the presidency.
Alliance of the Sahel states deploy unified force in a three-border area, and Nigeria and China strengthen collaboration against fake news.
We all know that this is a very serious problem, not just for Nigeria or for China, but for the entire world. The world is grappling with issue of fake news that we know can really tear countries apart.
Please stay tuned for details of these stories and more.
Here is a more edit with Newslink.
Many thanks for joining our broadcast. Let's begin in Guinea-Bissau, where the latest political news, where President of the dissolved National People's Assembly, Domingos Simoes Pereira, known as DSP, declared on Thursday evening that Umaru Sissoco Embalo is no longer president of the Republic, affirming that his mandate ended on February 27, 2025. According to him, in the absence of a new elected head of state, the leadership of the country should return to the President of the National Assembly. He insisted in a message published on social networks that the Standing Committee of the National People's Assembly must take the initiative in this process, despite the dissolution of the Assembly by Embalo in December 2023. The statement comes as Sissoco Embalo has set general elections for November 30, 2025. After earlier giving up on running for another term, he finally announced his candidacy. His government has also forced a joint ECOWAS-UNOWAS mission to leave the country earlier than planned, as it was preparing to submit a proposal to political actors for ending the crisis. The political situation in Guinea-Bissau remains tense, with a persistent institutional crisis and uncertainties about the upcoming transition. We cross over now to Liberia, where the government, in its drive to curb corruption in the country, has seen President Joseph Boakai issue the Executive Order Number 145. This executive order amends and renews Executive Order Number 126, extending the mandates of the Asset Recovery Task Force for an additional year. The aim is to enforce the zero-tolerance policy of the Boakai administration towards corruption while enforcing an airtight system that is adequately able to deal with issues of corruption and related matters. Abraham Parker in Monrovia completes the story.
The order is focused on retrieving public assets that have been unlawfully converted for private use, reinforcing the government's commitment to accountability and transparency. The Asset Recovery Task Force, which was initially established in March 2024, is tasked with identifying, tracing, and recovering both fixed and liquid assets belonging to the government of Liberia, regardless of their location. And with this expansion, the task force is expected to continue its crucial work in asset recovery. Key elements of Executive Order 145 include the continuing operation of the task force under the Minister of State for Special Services, overseen by a 5-member committee. The task force is also empowered to collaborate with essential government agencies such as the Ministry of Justice, the Liberia Anti-Corruption Commission, the Office of the Ombudsman, the General Services Agency, the Liberia Revenue Authority, and the Financial Intelligence Agency. In addition to its investigative and recovery capabilities, the task force has the authority to impose travel restrictions on individuals under investigation and to engage Interpol and other diplomatic channels to repatriate both suspects and recover assets. For Newslink on WADR, I'm Abraham Parker in Monrovia.
In a swift reaction, the Executive Director of Integrity Watch Liberia, Harold Ido, stressed the urgent need for collective efforts to tackle corruption in the country, especially in the natural resource sector. Ido wants the government to consider the critical importance of ensuring that the benefits of the country's resources reach the common people. He urged stakeholders from various sectors to work together in fostering transparency and integrity, ultimately aiming to create a sustainable framework that empowers local communities and enhances the nation's economic well-being. We'll take a listen.
If you look at the geopolitical, what is happening around the world, the USAID, as we know, has withdrawn its support. So we believe that there's a better time now. If we've been talking about the need to ensure the sector works better for us, this is the opportune time, because across the globe, the aid is shrinking, because priorities across the globe are shifting. And we believe that as a country that is highly endowed with natural resources, this is the time for us to be able to make sure that we manage our resources in a way that will be transparent, inclusive, and accountable, and we as a nation can derive the best out of it to benefit our people and to lift ourselves out of poverty. When civil society is advocating and agitating for transparency, there is always the assumption that perhaps maybe civil society or human rights activists don't like private sector. We believe that private sector is the engine of growth for every nation, and we strongly embrace private sector. The challenge is that we want to make sure that private sector, when it comes to negotiation, when it comes to extraction, it becomes a win-win affair. That the private sector benefits, and then Liberia also benefits, and the communities also benefit. We expect the private sector also to be able to elevate their voices onto this platform. We can all have a collective voice and a collective agenda in terms of how we can move Liberia forward.
Well, we'll be speaking more with Harold Ido, the Executive Director of Integrity Watch Liberia, on our guest interview segment.
More stories coming up on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
We head now to the Gambia, where the National Human Rights Commission, NHRC, has expressed its concern over the recent voting in the National Assembly on the Election Bill 2021 held on Tuesday, 4th of March 2025. This comes after lawmakers voted against the registration of Gambians in the diaspora and a clause in the election bill. The NHRC called for the inclusion of Gambians abroad in exercising their franchise. Sanklo Janko in Banjul completes the story.
The National Human Rights Commission expressed the concerns following the voting in Parliament, which the Commission states effectively denies Gambians in the diaspora the fundamental rights to vote. The recent vote at the National Assembly rejecting Clause 14 of the Elections Bill 2021 has, according to the Commission, reversed the government's commitment to ensuring the effective participation of Gambians abroad in national decision-making process. The NHRC, while frowning on the decision, described it as disenfranchising a significant segment of Gambian society who continue to make invaluable contributions to the country's socio-economic development, contributing 31.5% of gross domestic product (GDP) in 2024 alone. The NHRC states that the Gambia also can, with commitment and willingness, enfranchise its citizens in the diaspora like other West African countries. The Commission therefore calls on the government of the Gambia and the IEC to take immediate and concrete steps to fulfill their commitment to enfranchising Gambians in the diaspora. NHRC further states that every eligible citizen, irrespective of their geographical location, should have the right and the opportunity to vote and be voted for.
Sankle Janko filed a report from Banjul and on to the Sahel state, where the three AES countries continue to strengthen their military cooperation within Mali, Burkina Faso and Niger, having already deployed their unified forces in the so-called three-border area. The operation, called Yerekeko 2, stayed in the area between February 24 and Thursday, March 6. More details from Mamadou Ramata Jallo and voiced by Gosinkoli.
This is a major step that has been taken, according to DEPA, the Directorate of Information and Public Relations of the Malian Armed Forces. The unified force of the AES was deployed in the so-called Three Borders area between February 24 and Thursday, March 6. Called Eureko, the operation carried out a patrol during this period and covered several strategic localities, Tesset in Mali, Terra in Niger, and Mako in Burkina Faso, as well as other surrounding areas. According to the Malian depot, the operation destroyed several terrorist bases in Goma and made it possible to arrest several suspects and seized weapons and logistical equipment belonging to the armed terrorist groups. Operation Eureko 2 was also deployed in the Triple Point area, the exact intersection of the three borders where terrorist groups are actively operating. As a reminder, the Alliance of Sahel States recently announced the establishment of a regional force of 5,000 men, a force with air, land, and intelligence capabilities.
That was Mamadou Ramata Jallo's report, voiced by Augustin Colley. In Côte d'Ivoire, the former head of the anti-drug unit of the port of Abidjan and his co-defendants tried in a cocaine diversion case have been sentenced to 5 years in prison by the criminal court on Wednesday. The facts date back to 2022 with the arrests of a first suspect, an informant of the anti-drug unit in whose home investigators discovered 37 grams of cocaine. According to the investigation, the drugs found at the informant's house were part of a shipment intercepted a few weeks earlier. More details with Alben Ade in Abidjan and voiced by Abdullahi Hassan.
At the end of the trial, which took place behind closed doors, the Ivorian justice system accused the former head of the anti-drug unit of the autonomous port of Abidjan and two other officers of the gendarmerie, as well as their informant, of their involvement in a case of cocaine diversion. The verdict of the criminal court is 5 years of imprisonment for each of the accused. The case dates back to 2022. A drug dealer in Abidjan presented himself as an informant of the anti-drug unit of the port of Abidjan. He accused several gendarmes of diverting seizures. An investigation led to the discovery of 37 grams of cocaine at his home, which he said came from a shipment intercepted a few weeks earlier. This is how the continuation of the investigation made it possible to trace back to the former head of the anti-drug unit of the port of Abidjan and the officers who allegedly orchestrated the diversion of part of the cargo, estimated at 200 kilograms. The drug was taken in a 2022 seizure of nearly 2 tons of raw cocaine from Latin America, a quantity estimated at 25 billion CFA francs. In 2022, another seizure of more than 2 tons of cocaine was made in Abidjan and San Pedro. Around 30 suspects were arrested, among them the police chief of San Pedro, who has since been sentenced to 10 years in prison.
That was Alben Ade's report in Abidjan, voiced by Abdullahi Hassan. You're listening to Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio 94.9 FM in Dakar and across our partner stations in the sub-region. Here is a reminder of the top stories. Leader of opposition in Guinea-Bissau declares Umaru Sissoco Embalo no longer the country's president. CSOs in Liberia back government's drive to fight corruption as President Boubacar issues an executive order. Alliance of the Sahel states deploy unified force in the three-border area. Still ahead in the news, Nigeria and China strengthened collaboration against fake news. We do have a guest interview and sports news. Please stay with us.
West Africa Democracy Radio. It's you speaking.
Well, don't forget you can listen to us live on wadr.org and follow our live stream on YouTube and Facebook. In its fight against terrorism and violent extremism, Benin is equipping itself with significant military equipment to better deal with the current threat. In this regard, the country received a surveillance aircraft on Thursday. Offered by the European Union, the aircraft is supposed to strengthen Operation Mirador, which is taking place in the north of the country. Details and explanations in Cotonou with our correspondent Aziz Adam Soule and voiced by Christopher Ticho.
This new military aircraft will be used to strengthen the capacity of Operation Mirador, launched in early 2022 against the threat of terrorism. It is a reconnaissance and surveillance aircraft whose aim is to better secure Benin's borders with its neighbors. The ceremony for handing over the aircraft to the Beninese army took place at the Cotonou Air Base. in the presence of the Chief of Staff of the European Union and the Chief of Staff of the Beninese Army, General Fructo Gbagidi. Few days before the acquisition of the equipment, Benin consolidated its military cooperation with the United States. On February 27, a 5-year cooperation program was concluded between the Beninese Armed Forces and the American Army. This collaboration is based on 5 major axes: internal security, intelligence, health, logistics, and the fight against terrorism. This agreement aims to strengthen the capacity of the Beninese army, particularly in the areas of military aviation, intelligence, and the training of special forces by 2030. These new security partnerships between Cotonou and Western powers are taking place in a context where Benin is hit by the terrorist threat in its border areas with Burkina Faso and Niger. Last February, Benin suffered an attack in the area claimed by JNIM, which left more than 30 deaths.
Our correspondent in Cotonou, Aziz Adam Sule, filed a report and voiced by Christopher Tichon. Now, Nigeria and China have pledged to work together to combat misinformation and fake news. Nigeria's Minister of Information and National Orientation, Mohammed Idris, and the Chinese ambassador to Nigeria, Yu Dunai, reaffirmed their commitment to accurate information sharing to strengthen democracy and societal development. Usman Umar witnessed the bilateral meeting and now reports.
During a meeting in Abuja, Minister Mohammed Idris stressed the dangers of misinformation and emphasized the need for responsible reporting.
We all know that this is a very serious problem, not just for Nigeria or for China, but for the entire world. The world is grappling with issue of fake news that we know can really tear countries apart. Therefore, Nigeria is collaborating with a number of countries using the UNESCO model to ensure that whatever digital platforms are there to share information will be done in a way and manner that will not jeopardize the very existence of the people that it serves, that it sets out to serve in the first place.
On his part, Chinese ambassador Yu Dunai highlighted the long-standing diplomatic ties between Nigeria and China and reaffirmed China's commitment to media cooperation and African development.
China-Nigeria enjoys excellent bilateral relations. This is a relation built on the mutual respect, mutual understanding, and win-win cooperation. Over the past half century, actually this year marks the 54th anniversary of our bilateral ties. Over the past half century, we have always stand together. We have always supported each other, particularly in times of difficulty, and we have always respected each other. We keep very close, high-level communications, and our cooperation, in various fields have bring a lot of tangible benefits for both of our nations.
With this new collaboration, both countries aim to curb misinformation while deepening diplomatic and media relations. For Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, Usman Umar reporting from Abuja.
Politics, analysis on major news, social matters, and all. This is A Guest.
In our guest interview this afternoon, we'll be talking with the Executive Director of Integrity Watch, Liberia, Harold Aido, who has stressed the urgent need for collective effort to tackle corruption in the country, especially in the natural resource sector. Take a listen.
We from civil society, or as Integrity Watch Liberia, are particularly a bit happy that we see a more exerted effort on the part of the presidency to be able to address some of the corrupt practices or issue around government officials stealing money and taking them, into foreign countries and other state assets and so forth. So we are particularly happy that the government is taking some steps towards that. But we have a number of fundamental issues with the asset recovery. As you may be aware, we already have the Liberia Anti-Corruption Commission. Now, our call as civil society is not to have power structures and then also weaken the anti-corruption institutions. we have consistently called on the government to strengthen the existing structure, particularly the anti-graft institutions, in this case, the Anti-Corruption Commission and the General Auditing Commission. Yes, we applaud the president for seemingly showing within the public space that, yes, he wants to be able to extend the mandate of the asset recovery team in order to be able to fight, recover state looted asset or, quote unquote, assets, but either in terms of fiscal or, material and other resources that belongs to government to recover them. But we believe that this is not a sustainable approach. We believe that the sustainable approach should be to strengthen the Liberia Anti-Corruption Commission, to empower it, to give it the adequate resources to be able to recruit the human resource capital that it requires, the logistical capacity and it needs to be able to execute its mandate. This is a more sustainable way. But we feel that, setting up a parastructure, without adequately supporting and strengthening existing institutions, we think is not sustainable.
Well, do you think the ineffectiveness of these government parastatals or agencies that have been on ground inform the president in establishing this task force and even further extending their mandate and for an additional year?
I don't think so. So you can only evaluate the effectiveness of an institution when the institution has been adequately resourced, right? For protracted period of time, civil society has been championing, has been advocating and calling for government to be able to provide the needed resources to these state institutions. But we have seen feet dragging and, lukewarm attitude towards that. As you can see, we've seen remarkable transformation from the Liberia Anti-Corruption Commission, particularly the way it has handled government institutions and agencies and individuals who, for example, have failed to declare their asset. If you've been following the news, for example, the president did suspend, hundreds of officials who have failed to declare their assets. And this work has been, was led as a result to the work of the Liberia Anti-Corruption Commission. We have developed a digital platform for citizens to report corruption, and there has been several corruption allegations being made across the country with multiple reports coming in. The anti-corruption institution does not have adequate prosecutors. It does not have adequate investigators. It is not adequately resourced to be able to follow up on these issues and sometimes to go to court. So, you cannot evaluate the effectiveness of an institution when they don't have the resources to be able to execute its mandate. So I think the government needs to be able to live up to its commitment and stop the lip service. I think we should stop window dressing some of these issues and make sure that we take the bull by the horn and resolve the issues from its root causes and make sure that the perennial issues of inadequacy in resources to many of these anti-corruption institutions are addressed. That is the only way we can emphatically and with evidence say that these institutions are not effective and we can take the rightful step to make sure that we strengthen them. But beyond that, I believe that the actions to be able to set up power structures that are performing the mandates that are constitutionally and statutorily are allocated to specific ministries and agencies are not sustainable. And we, in a way, sometimes one will also want to question the sincerity of the president to actually fight corruption.
Mr. Harold, thank you so much for your insight.
Thank you for having me.
Harold Ado is the Executive Director of Integrity Watch, Liberia. Well, here is Sport News with Sankuli Janko.
Hello there, warm welcome and thank you for joining us. Niger's President of the National Council for the Safeguarding of the Fatherland, Brigadier General Abdurrahman Tiani, has given his official endorsement to Colonel Major Jibril Hima Hamidou, commonly known as Pele, for the upcoming FIFA Council elections, according to africasoccer.net. The announcement was made by Niger's Minister of Sports, Colonel Major Abdurrahman Amadou, who confirmed that he and Hima were received by President Tiani to formalize the candidacy. The FIFA Council elections are set to take place in March 2025 in Cairo, Egypt, where representatives from across Africa will compete for a seat in world football's highest decision-making body. Hima, currently the president of the Niger Football Federation, Fenifoot, has reportedly played an influential role in the country's football administration. His bid for a seat on FIFA Council represents an opportunity for Niger to gain stronger representation on the global football stage, Africa Soccer reports. Elsewhere, Burkina Faso has included former Ivory Coast youth midfielder Mohamed Zougrana in its squad for the upcoming 2026 FIFA World Cup qualifiers this month. The midfielder who represented Ivory Coast at youth level has been included in the Burkina Faso's double outings against Djibouti and Guinea-Bissau in the 5th and 6th rounds of the qualifying series. Despite featuring for Ivory Coast at the youth level, the enterprising midfielder has switched allegiance to represent his native country at the international level, it has been reported. The Ivorian Zougrana is expected to play a huge role for Burkina Faso's national team as they seek to